I knew something was wrong the moment I pulled into the dispatch lot at 5:30 Monday morning and saw two refrigerated trailers sitting at the loading dock with their engines off. Those trailers are never off. Not at 5:30. Not ever. They run around the clock because the pharmaceutical cargo inside has a temperature window so narrow that a 2-degree drift can turn a 6-figure load into a biohazard disposal problem. My name is Kowalski. I'm 53 years old, and for 11 years I have been the Senior Systems Manager for Inland Freight Solutions, a regional carrier that moves time-sensitive cargo across 14 states in the Midwest and Southeast. We run 412 commercial vehicles, employ roughly 2,600 drivers, dock workers, dispatchers, and mechanics, and we handle everything from hospital-grade medications to live organ transport to just-in-time auto parts for 3 assembly plants in Ohio and Tennessee. When our system works, nobody notices. When it doesn't, people can die. That is not a figure of speech. I mean that literally. A wrong routing call on a transplant organ run is not a billing error you fix on the next invoice. There is no next invoice for the guy waiting on that kidney. I want to be clear about something before I tell you what happened, because I've seen these kinds of stories, and I know the first thing people say. If one person leaving breaks the whole system, the system was already broken. Fair point. I've thought about that a lot. The truth is more complicated. The system wasn't built around me being irreplaceable. It was built around me being the person who understood it deeply enough to keep patching the parts that kept breaking. There's a difference. A car is not designed to require a master mechanic, but if you've been driving the same car for 11 years in all kinds of weather on roads that weren't built for it, and you've fixed every quirk and learned every rattle, you are the reason that car still runs. Replace you with someone who just passed their driver's test and handed them the keys on a Tuesday and told them to figure it out. That's not a systems problem. That's a management problem. And that's exactly what the nephew was. His name was Tyler Marsh, 27 years old, Wharton MBA, the son of our CFO's younger sister, which made him family in the way that only matters in private companies where the org chart bends around bloodlines. He came in 3 months after the Marsh family recapitalized the business following our previous ownership group's messy exit. Nobody was told directly that Tyler was family. He was introduced as a strategic transformation consultant, which is the corporate version of, "We're paying for this whether you like it or not." Tyler was the kind of guy who wore Allbirds to a freight terminal. He had one of those voices that sounds like he's always presenting to a board, even when he's asking where the bathroom is. He had never driven a commercial vehicle, never worked a dock shift, never stayed up until 3 in the morning troubleshooting why a temperature alarm was throwing false positives on the reefer units out of Indianapolis. But he had slides. God, did he have slides? The meeting was on a Thursday. My boss, the director of operations, sent me a calendar invite the night before with no subject line. I knew that meant bad news. Good news comes with context. No subject line means someone has already decided something and they just need you in the room to make it official. I walked into the conference room on the 4th floor and Tyler was already there, laptop open, projector casting a 50-inch logo onto the wall behind him. The logo said FlowSync in a font that cost someone a lot of money to make look like it didn't. My boss, Dennis, was sitting at the table with his arms crossed the way he does when he's uncomfortable but not uncomfortable enough to push back. "Ray," Tyler said, "the way young consultants say your name when they want you to know they've prepared for this conversation. I've been reviewing the logistics management architecture, and I think we have a real opportunity to modernize." I sat down. What does modernize mean here? He clicked to a slide that showed our current system, which he'd labeled Legacy Infrastructure in red letters next to FlowSync, which was labeled Next Generation Platform in green. I've seen this slide before. The colors are always the same. Red means old, green means good, and the person who made the slide is never the person who has to live with what happens after. Tyler walked me through FlowSync like it was Christmas morning. Cloud-based, he said. Real-time visibility. AI-assisted route optimization. Automated compliance tracking. No more custom scripts. No more manual patches. No more dependency on tribal knowledge. That last phrase, tribal knowledge. I want you to remember that phrase. I looked at Dennis. Dennis looked at the table. I turned back to Tyler. "What's the implementation timeline?" He smiled. 4 weeks. We run parallel for 2 weeks, then cut over. 4 weeks, I said. FlowSync's team has done this dozens of times, he said. They have an onboarding playbook. I want you to understand the scale of what he was suggesting. Our routing and dispatch system isn't just an app that tells drivers where to go. It's a platform I've built and maintained over 11 years that integrates with the temperature monitoring hardware on every refrigerated unit, the electronic logging devices mandated by the FMCSA, the hazmat placarding database updated by the DOT, 3 different hospital network systems for organ and pharmaceutical coordination, the assembly plant JIT scheduling software in Dayton, Nashville, and Smyrna, and the union contract rules for 2 separate Teamster locals that have different overtime thresholds, break requirements, and grievance procedures. The organ transport protocols alone took me 8 months to build correctly. A single misrouted transplant flight connection is a federal incident. The FAA, the UNOS network, and the hospital procurement teams all have to be in sync within 15-minute windows. FlowSync's onboarding playbook was designed for regional food distributors and furniture retailers. I laid all of this out, not emotionally, just factually, point by point. Tyler nodded through all of it with the particular expression of someone who has already decided you are the obstacle. We'll map all of that into FlowSync's framework, he said. Have you spoken to UNOS about an API integration? They have a generic healthcare logistics module. That's not the same thing, Tyler. Dennis finally looked up. Ray, the decision has been made at the ownership level. We need you to support the transition. And there it was. Not we want your input, not help us understand the risks. The decision has been made. I'd heard that sentence before at other companies. It usually came 6 months before the part where they called you back. What's my role in this transition? I asked. Tyler clicked to the next slide. We need you to document everything. Your scripts, your workarounds, your vendor contacts. Full knowledge transfer to FlowSync's implementation team. I looked at him for a long moment. And after the documentation, Dennis cleared his throat. We're restructuring the systems team. Your position is being eliminated. We'll have a very competitive severance package. Competitive. Another word that sounds better than it is. I've got 2 questions, I said. First, the organ transport runs. Who's going to own the UNOS coordination protocol after I'm gone? Tyler will interface with FlowSync's healthcare specialist, Dennis said. And second, the Teamster Local 208 contract has a clause about rest period calculations that's been disputed twice in arbitration. It's not in any written system document because the settlement was verbal, and I was the only IFS representative in the room both times. Do you want that in my documentation? Dennis went a little pale. Yes, obviously, yes. I'll do my best, I said. But I want to be on record that 4 weeks is not enough time to transfer 11 years of operational knowledge to a platform that has never touched freight this complex. Tyler closed his laptop. We appreciate your candor, Ray. Your last day will be the Friday of week 4. I drove home on the expressway with the windows down and Springsteen on the radio. I wasn't angry, exactly. I was watching a disaster form from a safe distance, the way you watch a storm front build on the horizon when you're already inside and dry. You know what's coming. The only question is how bad. I spent the next 3 weeks doing exactly what they asked. I documented everything I could put into words. I wrote procedure guides, created flowcharts, cataloged every custom script with notes explaining what it did and why. I walked FlowSync's implementation team, a polite group of 20-somethings from their Chicago office, through every integration point I could think of. I said the same things 3 and 4 times. I flagged the organ transport protocol in writing twice, and sent a separate email to Dennis with a subject line that said critical UNOS integration not replicable in current FlowSync build in capital letters. Dennis replied with noted, thank you. Here's what I couldn't document. 11 years of instinct. I couldn't write down the gut feeling that tells you when a driver's ELD data doesn't match his fuel card, swipes in a way that means his route got changed in the field but nobody logged it. I couldn't capture the muscle memory of knowing that the reefer units on the Indianapolis to Cincinnati pharmaceutical run 2 degrees warm in summer because of how the loading dock faces the afternoon sun, so you set the thermostat to compensate. I couldn't transfer the knowledge that local 208's shop steward, a man named Gerald who has strong opinions about grievance timelines, will quietly let a lot of things slide if you give him a heads-up call before an issue becomes official. These things live in experience. You can't export them to a cloud platform. You can barely put them in a document. They're in your hands, the way a mechanic's knowledge is in his hands. You can write a manual, but the manual doesn't know what the rattle means. My last Friday came. I cleaned out my desk. I shook hands with the people I liked, which was most of the people. I handed my badge to the security desk, and walked to my truck in the October sunlight and felt the particular lightness of someone who's been waiting for a very specific kind of shoe to drop. I didn't have to wait long. My phone started going Saturday morning. Texts from dispatchers I'd worked with for years. Ray, the system's showing weird pickup windows. The Dayton plant is getting a scheduled delivery for 3 in the morning. Ray, the reefer units aren't syncing with the new platform. The temp alerts are going dark. Ray, we've got a driver who completed his run, but FlowSync is showing him as still active in Michigan. I read the texts. I didn't respond. It wasn't my system anymore. By Sunday afternoon, things had escalated. A dock supervisor in Columbus texted me a screenshot of FlowSync's dispatch board. It looked like someone had shuffled a deck of cards and dealt them randomly. Routes that should have taken 4 hours were showing 18. Drivers who'd clocked out were being assigned new loads. 3 refrigerated units showed temperature readings of -40, which is either a catastrophic equipment failure or, more likely, the sensor integration hadn't been calibrated and the system was reading null values as minimum range. I called Dennis on Sunday evening. Dennis, your reefer sensors aren't talking to FlowSync correctly. If those temps are real, you've got a spoilage issue on pharmaceutical loads right now. Tyler's team is working on it, Dennis said. Which sensors are they checking first? I'll ask fast, I said. The Cincinnati Mercy Run has organ transport protocol active starting 6 a.m. Monday. I know, Ray, we have it handled. Monday morning I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the news on low when my phone rang at 7:14. It was a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. The voicemail was from a transplant coordinator at Cincinnati Mercy Hospital. She was calm, but her voice had that particular tension of a medical professional who's been trained not to panic but is very close to it. She said she'd been trying to reach Inland Freight's dispatch for 40 minutes. She said the organ procurement team was on the ground in Louisville with a donor liver. She said FlowSync's system had the transport vehicle assigned to a furniture delivery in Lexington. She said she'd found my personal number through the hospital's vendor contact archive, a backup file someone at IFS had entered years ago. She said she needed to know if we could get a vehicle to Louisville Executive Airport in the next 40 minutes, or if she needed to call a backup carrier. I called her back immediately. Then I called Dennis. Dennis picked up on the first ring, which told me he already knew it was bad. The liver run, I said. We're aware. Tyler is... Dennis. Stop. The backup vehicle for organ transport is bay 14 inches, the Covington terminal. The keys are in the lockbox outside the fleet manager's office. Combination is the last 4 digits of the DOT authority number. The driver you want is Marcus Webb. He's certified for UNO's protocol, he knows the Mercy loading dock procedures, and he can make Louisville Executive in 38 minutes if he leaves now. Call Marcus directly. His number is in the union roster under preferred transport. Do not run this through FlowSync. Call him on his cell phone and tell him it's a code 2 run. There was a silence on the other end of the phone that lasted about 4 seconds. How do you know Marcus's? Because I built the backup protocol, Dennis. Call him now. He called Marcus. Marcus made the run. The liver got where it needed to go. The recipient was in surgery by 10 a.m. I know this because the transplant coordinator called me back an hour later to thank me personally, which was one of the stranger phone calls I've ever received in a parking lot on a Tuesday. But that was the easy disaster, the one with a solution already in place. The bigger ones were still coming. By Monday afternoon, Inland Freight Solutions was operating in controlled chaos. FlowSync's routing engine had spent the weekend learning the network and had learned it wrong. The AI optimization Tyler loved to talk about had decided, based on mileage data alone, that several of our driver routes were inefficient and had automatically reassigned loads. What the AI didn't know was that those routes were structured around Local 208's contract requirement that drivers within 15 miles of their home terminal get priority on short-haul assignments. It's a grievance trigger if you violate it. You don't get a warning. Gerald files the grievance. The clock starts, and you're in arbitration before you've had time to explain that your algorithm didn't know about the 2019 settlement. By noon Monday, Gerald had filed 4 grievances. By 3 p.m., it was 9. By the time the afternoon shift change came around, Local 208 had authorized a work action. They called it a refusal to operate under unsafe dispatching conditions, which was technically about the ELD synchronization issues, but was really about the grievances. Either way, the result was the same. Drivers parked their trucks. Not all of them. About 60% of the fleet kept rolling because those drivers were on non-union contracts or had loads in transit they couldn't legally abandon. But the union drivers parked, and the union drivers were the ones with the seniority and the specialized certifications, the hazmat endorsements, the doubles and triples authority, the tanker certifications. You don't just replace those guys with whoever's available. I heard about the work action from my old dispatcher, a woman named Connie who'd been with IFS for 17 years and who texted me updates with the deadpan efficiency of someone reporting weather conditions. 67 trucks parked at Covington, she wrote. Tyler is on a call with FlowSync, has been for 2 hours. Gerald is in the parking lot with a folding chair. I could picture Gerald in that folding chair. He had a specific expression for these moments, patient and completely unapologetic, the face of a man who has read every word of a contract that nobody else bothered to read. The Dayton assembly plant started calling at 4 p.m. They had a JIT window for brake components that was closing. If the parts didn't arrive by 7, the line stopped. Line stoppages cost the plant roughly $80,000 per hour. Their procurement director was not calm in the way the transplant coordinator had been calm. He was a different kind of not calm. Dennis called me at 4:45. I was in my garage, reorganizing my tool cabinet, which is what I do when I'm thinking. Ray, Dennis, we have a situation. I know. I've been following it. I need to ask you something. He stopped, started again. The work action. The grievances, is that fixable? The grievances are fixable. Call Gerald tonight, not through official channels. Call him on his personal cell. Tell him you're acknowledging the violations. You're pulling FlowSync's auto routing for union drivers immediately, and you're going back to manual dispatch for the next 72 hours, while you sort out the contract compliance settings. He'll pause the action. He's not looking to blow up the company. He just needs to know someone in management actually read the contract. And the Dayton run? Bay 14 again. You've got 2 non-union certified drivers in the Covington terminal who can run doubles. The brake component load is staged in row C. If they leave in the next 20 minutes, they make the 7 o'clock window. How do you... Because I staged it on Thursday before I left, I said. I knew there was a chance your new system wouldn't know about the JIT windows. So I left the loads staged and put a note in the physical binder on the dock manager's desk. Nobody reads physical binders anymore, but I still write in them. There was a long pause. Ray, I need you to come back. I set down the socket wrench I'd been holding and sat on the workbench. For how long? However long it takes. That's not a number, Dennis. He said a number. It was decent but not serious. I told him my number. He was quiet for a moment. That's Ray? That's what 11 years of institutional knowledge costs when you try to replace it with a 4-week onboarding playbook, I said. Not angry, just factual. He agreed to my number. I told him we weren't done. I want FlowSync off organ transport protocol permanently. That goes back to the system I built, maintained on a dedicated server that Tyler's team does not have access to. Put that in writing. He agreed. I want the local 208 integration managed under a standing protocol that I review and sign off on before any system changes. Written into my contract. If FlowSync changes anything touching union dispatch rules, I see it first. He agreed. And I want the documentation, not the other way around. I want FlowSync to document what they built, so that when they inevitably get replaced by the next shiny platform in 5 years, the next person doesn't start from zero. He agreed to all of it. The call lasted 12 minutes. I knew Tyler would find out about the terms. I didn't particularly care. I called Gerald from my truck on the way to the terminal. He answered on the second ring. Ray Kowalski, he said, like he'd been expecting the call. I heard you were out. I'm back in, I said. Here's what I need you to hear. I told him exactly what I'd told Dennis. Manual dispatch for 72 hours. Violations acknowledged in writing. The auto-routing would be configured by someone who had actually read the contract before it touched a single union driver assignment. Gerald was quiet for a moment. He had a gift for pauses, Gerald. He let silence do work that other people used words for. You know what they should have done, he said finally. Run parallel for at least 2 full pay cycles before cutting over, I said. He made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. Parallel runs, Ray. It's not complicated. It's never complicated until someone decides it is. The drivers were back by morning, not because the grievances were resolved. That process takes weeks, but because Gerald had enough history with me to know that when I said the violations would be addressed, they'd be addressed. That kind of trust takes years to build. You can't import it from a cloud platform. I spent the next 11 days at the terminal running on coffee and bad cafeteria sandwiches. I won't walk you through every technical fix because this isn't a software manual and you don't need to know what a cascading integration failure looks like from the inside. What I will tell you is that FlowSync's healthcare module was not built for UNO's protocol and needed to be bypassed entirely. I will tell you that the reefer sensor issue was caused by a firmware conflict between FlowSync's IoT layer and the temperature monitoring hardware on our older units, which Tyler's team had marked in their assessment as compatible based on a spec sheet that was 4 years out of date. I will tell you that the AI routing engine had no concept of detention time, which is what happens when a driver arrives at a shipper and waits sometimes for hours while the load is prepared, and which has specific pay implications under both Teamster contracts. The AI was calculating routes as if drivers teleported between stops. A lot of the grievances trace back to that single gap. I fixed what could be fixed. I documented what I fixed in more detail than anyone had documented anything in the history of IFS's systems team. I did this deliberately because the lesson wasn't that complex systems should be undocumented. The lesson was that documentation should exist, be maintained, and be read by the people making decisions about changing the system. One of those things had been my failure. 2 of them were management failures. I owned my part. Tyler, to his credit, stayed out of my way. I don't think he's a bad person. I think he's a person who was put in a position he wasn't qualified for and given authority he hadn't earned. And when things went wrong, he retreated behind the language of strategy and optimization because that's what he knew how to do. He left for another engagement in week 3. Nobody announced it. He was just in fewer meetings, and then he wasn't in any. The last morning I walked into the terminal on that contract, the dock was running the way I like it. Trucks pulling in and out on schedule, the dispatch board clean and color-coded, the reefer units showing stable temps across the board. Connie was at her station with a headset on, talking a driver through a consignee location issue the way she always does, with the patience of someone who knows the job and trusts herself to do it. I stopped by Dennis's office on my way out. He looked better than he had 2 weeks ago. He'd gotten some sleep. New contract starts Monday, he said. I know. I'll be here. He started to say something else, and I could tell it was going to be the version of an apology that management gives when they can't quite say the actual words, something about lessons learned or moving forward. I spared him. I need the FlowSync team to finish their compliance audit by Friday, I said. The DOT inspection window opens in 6 weeks, and I want those ELD records clean before anyone from the federal government looks at them. He nodded, relieved to have something concrete to discuss. Done. I walked out through the dispatch floor and out to the dock, where the morning air smelled like diesel and river and October. A driver I didn't recognize caught my eye and nodded the way drivers nod, not friendly exactly, just acknowledging that you belong there, that you're someone who knows what this place is. Some jobs look simple from the outside. You move things from one place to another. How hard can it be? But every load that moves has a chain behind it, rules and contracts and relationships and systems that took years to calibrate to the particular weight of that specific work in that specific place. Break one link in that chain and you don't just lose efficiency. You lose a transplant window. You lose a production run. You lose the trust of 2,000 people who show up every day and do hard physical work and expect in return that when Friday comes, the math will be right and the check will be there. I poured good coffee from the thermos I'd started keeping in my truck again and watched the first trailer of the day back up to Bay 7 with the slow precision of a driver who's done this 10,000 times and doesn't need to think about it anymore. Just does it. Because that's what experience looks like from the outside. Effortless. Automatic. Like the machine runs itself. It doesn't run itself. It never did. Somebody just knew it well enough that you couldn't tell the difference. I raised my thermos at nobody in particular and drank my coffee in the morning light.